Welcome back to the Civic Sci TV News Show. I'm your host, Jake Krause. Let's see what's new this week in the world of civic science. The theme this week is Planet Earth. Climate will understandably play a big role in this year's upcoming election in the US. Are you part of a newsroom that is focusing on the upcoming election? Climate on the Ballot is a newsletter to track new topics in climate change and focus on how to integrate them into your election coverage. They will also give advice and share similar work covering climate as it relates to the 2024 election. Sign up for the newsletter at the link in the description below. This last one reaches beyond planet Earth, but it's still an opportunity worth sharing. Do you love planetariums, or are you at least affiliated with one? The International Planetarium Society has launched a new Planetarium Education Research Fellowship. The fellowship offers $5,000 to conduct educational research in planetariums to best figure out how to use planetariums for education. Applications are due the 15th of March and start by July of 2024. Thanks to the SciCommer newsletter for sharing. There is new research on press releases from scientific institutions that focused on ocean climate change. A study examined press releases on ocean climate change and ocean plastics and analyzed how they were framed. From 2017 to 2022, 323 press releases were assessed by researchers. They found that ocean plastic was presented as a biological and health issue, with an emphasis on solutions and society's obligations to implement them. However, ocean climate change was framed as an environmental and socioeconomic problem, highlighting politics for solutions. Narrative was only used to personify science or represent scientists. More social dimensions might be needed in future press releases to better engage audiences. Are you tired of the doom and gloom related to climate coverage? Check out Climate Solutions Journalism tips from the Solutions Journalism Network. There are many tips from expert climate journalists from the Climate Solutions cohort that gave 20 journalists the chance to focus on climate solutions pieces. 4 of them are highlighted and give advice like collaborating with frontline communities and highlighting strengths of potential solutions before tackling weaknesses. Thanks to the Nature Beat for sharing. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's edition of the Civic Sci TV News Show. We hope to see you next week.
The STEM Learning Ecosystems Initiative fosters collaboration among those working to remove barriers to the access of STEM education for all students.
So what we have recognized over a number of decades of work is that if you're really going to be serious about equity and access and opportunity, that the kind of infrastructure has to be in place in which education is the responsibility of the entire community, not just the education system itself. So if you look at communities, they're made up of lots of different constituency groups. And if you look at the STEM part of that connects to workforce, that is part of an economic driver for a community, you find it's as much about the post-secondary community, universities and community colleges, and nonprofits that are STEM rich, like zoos and museums. And it's also about the Girl Scouts. It's about what goes on in K-12 or PK-12 and so on. When you look closer and you see those thriving communities that do a beautiful job of actually supporting their children and the teaching and learning and structure the workforce for economic development, and you look closely, you find that there's an incredible level of collaboration and empowerment. And that's ecosystem behavior. That's interdependence. That's everybody finishing everybody else's sentences and understanding their roles and responsibilities. That's equity, because it doesn't slice off certain neighborhoods or zip codes. What it does is make access equitable across. And that's why the Ecosystem Project was born.
These ecosystems bring together educators, policymakers, industry leaders, and community organizations to support STEM learning opportunities, particularly for students in underrepresented and underserved communities.
Originally, when we designated science, technology, engineering, and math as a transdisciplinary endeavor, we created STEM schools because we weren't really sure what that looked like and how to teach those, and what did learning look like for the students. And so in Cleveland, Ohio, there was a new STEM school that was developed that was really a public-private partnership. And that first class of students, the founding students in that, were everybody's child in Cleveland. And Cleveland is predominantly a Title I eligible community, almost 100%. And there was a young man who really found his way through 3 buses to that school, and had found the school that year that it launched. And there was GE and Smart Lighting that was supporting it. It was Rockwell Automation. He got internships. He got all kinds of things in and out of school. He learned how to study. He learned what mathematics was, and he learned that his interest really had to have competencies. But it was all of that community that helped him. And over the 4 years of being in high school, he developed all kinds of capability that he wouldn't have had if it weren't for the ecosystem supporting that school, and went off to Harvard and with the Gates Millennium Scholarship. First time in Northeast Ohio ever. And ended up working for Microsoft, and now is in his own business, a software startup, runs a foundation of his own, and gives back. And that's a beautiful success story. And there are many, many of these all across our country.
Jan Morrison was a STEM educator for 35 years and is now the founder and CEO of TIES.
It's an organization that is actually 20 years old this year. And we are, I have spent a lot of my time cultivating and creating TIES. But prior to TIES, I was an educator, a STEM educator, in fact, for 35 years in all kinds of schools, and from 4th grade up, and actually being heading schools and principal and lots of jobs with kids.
TIES is a national initiative that supports the development and growth of these ecosystems, which is the backbone organization that aims to address equity issues and ensure that all students, regardless of their background or socioeconomic status, have access to high-quality STEM education.
Our tagline has always been helping children to make sense of the world. And so what we're very keen on is that that there's a quality STEM education out there for every child, and that actually STEM education is a right of every child. We feel that the kind of systems that need to be in place in order to support that are our mission. We're designers, we're co-creators, and in the end, we create the kind of infrastructure that supports exactly what is needed to help those children to make sense of the world.
It provides resources, tools, and assistance to help communities establish and sustain STEM learning ecosystems.
If we're going to do the work and we're going to spend our time and our energy and our lives, it really has to penetrate to the kids. And in doing that, it's really a joy. And that's what inspires me. There's never a time that I don't see a child, no matter what age. You know, they could be graduating, they could be just entering into school, or just sitting on somebody's lap, that you don't learn something if you spend the time. And that, what I'm particularly interested in always remembering is the 4-year-olds who always ask why. You know, they're constantly, you know, they bug everybody, and oftentimes we wish they wouldn't. But in the reality of it is, we have to cherish that, because that why and that energy and that view of the world is what gets us the innovations and makes us better at what we do.
TIES works with local partners to implement strategies and create systemic change to ensure more equitable access.
We can have glorious goals. We can have 40,000-foot aspirations. But in the end, you have to sweat the details. You have to know what it looks like in a child's life, or in teaching and learning, or in a community's life on a daily basis. So that means that we attend each other's meetings, that we provide support for each other. When there are opportunities, it doesn't stay with one group. It is then enabled. And let me give you an example of that. the Office of Naval Research few years ago really had never given Northeast Ohio a grant. And yet we have the capability. We have somebody who works for us who was part of the Navy at one point and knew how to do this. And we were developing a new aerospace and maritime school. And if you bring all those people together in that ecosystem from the ground up, a grant was provided, and therefore that school was really launched with magnificent capability in digital fabrication, in understanding maritime from the Navy up, and in real ways. And that's really sweating the details as together.
Overall, the goal of STEM learning ecosystems is to create a more coordinated and effective approach to STEM education that prepares students for success in college, career, and life.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Lofgren, and distinguished committee members for the opportunity to testify today before this panel. I'm Dr. Edwards, and I co-lead the National Q12 Education Partnership through a grant from the National Science Foundation. This consortium was spearheaded by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and NSF. I also co-lead education and workforce programs for one of the NSF Quantum Leap Challenge Institutes, Hybrid Quantum Architectures and Networks, and that's at the University of Illinois, University of Wisconsin, and University of Chicago. We've heard a lot about the importance of quantum to our nation, and we've heard a lot about things we must do in order to strengthen our leadership, including reauthorizing the NQI and continuing federal advancements. It's really amazing what we can do today with quantum, and I'm just so excited to talk about it because it's one of my favorite subjects. For success in the long term, we need to invest in programs that significantly expand the participation of teachers and educational institutions across the country. And I really appreciated the opening remarks by the chairman and by Ranking Member Lofgren. This approach recognizes that scaling the quantum workforce relies on empowering educators as mentors, role models, and ambassadors. Moreover, the public of all ages should have a front row seat to the development of quantum information science in places like museums and libraries, so that they can be prepared for a future that is influenced and underpinned by emerging quantum research and technology. The Q12 has been convening stakeholders around the development of a quantum workforce that draws on diverse strengths and backgrounds of people across the country. And we've had a lot of meetings. And we see that there is wide agreement that students need exposure to quantum information science early to ensure continued U.S. leadership in this fast-evolving field. This is reflected in the CHIPS and Science Act, which calls on NSF to increase the integration of quantum into STEM curricula at all levels, establishes a quantum education pilot program, and requires a workforce assessment study. And I want to thank Congress, and in particular this committee, for including these provisions in the legislation last year. Currently, there are a lot of early stage programs, and many are connected to Q12, that are increasing quantum readiness by expanding access to the field. And the National Quantum Initiative Act reauthorization is an opportunity to double down on this. Currently, we are missing resources for K-12 teachers. At higher levels, and Dr. Tahan mentioned this, educators broadly need cutting-edge labs to teach the next generation and provide upskilling for the current workforce. Essentially, we need more education and training opportunities for students, which are two different facets of workforce development, and they need to be readily available no matter where you live in this country and no matter your background. And this is important for addressing the persistent lack of diversity across quantum-related fields, as this contributes to severe shortages and limits our competitiveness as a nation. There are a lot of programs that are working to remove barriers to this field, but it's going to take time. You heard about the mention of World Quantum Day. These and other educational programs under the National Quantum Initiative Act are helping to dispel the notion that quantum concepts are only accessible to the very few. Rather, quantum can provide inspiration for young learners and teachers alike and empower them to understand a host of emerging technologies that are so vital to our nation. In this context, I'll highlight two elements that are possible opportunities as you look to reauthorize this act. First, I urge the committee to consider authorizing at least one national center for quantum education and workforce that will accelerate the readiness of educators and serve as a resource for existing programs to scale their local impact in communities across the country. A center-scale investment will concretely link the different parts of the educational pipeline and the different sectors and include the public. A new center could amplify and connect the initial workforce programs that have been developed, such as those supported across the many agencies. And it could provide an avenue for the much-needed comprehensive regular workforce studies. Second, there's a critical need for investments and public-private partnerships to build modern facilities, and we heard a little bit about this. Expanding quantum educational programs will help American workers have depth and agility over their careers and allow more people to prepare what comes next, quantum adjacent, or whatever else is down the road. And I want to just take a moment. I know I'm at my moment at time, but I want to take a moment and say that, I was reflecting yesterday on the National Quantum Initiative Act, and I look back 20 years, which predates it, and it's around this time of year that I spent a summer at NIST as a second-year grad student doing quantum physics research. It was my second time at NIST because I also spent a summer there as an undergrad coming from a small college. These experiences and the teachers who guided me have been integral to my path into quantum and my career today. And I hope this reauthorization expands such pathways for more students and more educators across our country. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, so today we're joined by CycomBytes author Sam Ridgway, who recently wrote a piece on CycomBytes titled "You Say Science Festival, I Say Science Festival," which is a digest response to a Journal of Science Communication article titled "Science Festival May Not Mean What We Think It Means, an analysis of how researchers and practitioners use this term," which was published in 2021. So Sam, I want to just start high level here. Tell us first, what is CycomBytes about, high level?
Yeah, so CycomBytes is an online blog, essentially, and it takes bytes or short summaries of longer academic science papers, and tries to write them in both a condensed and hopefully more accessible way, so that both fellow researchers or science communication practitioners can delve into it without necessarily having to go through all the journals themselves.
So are you suggesting that people skip the paper in itself?
No. If anything, it's a great. We've already identified certain things that we think might be of interest, and I think hopefully it either leads you to read the full paper, or if you're looking on your commute in the morning, it's enough just to get the thoughts going.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So now let's get right into it. What drew you to this paper? Because in this piece, sounds like you are passionate about Science Festival. Tell us more.
Yeah, so I've been really fortunate to both attend quite a few science festivals, but also be an intern and also a freelancer during certain science festivals. So as you'll see in the piece, I've written about the Great Exhibition Road Festival, which is hosted in London, which is where I'm currently living. And the Great Exhibition Road Festival is hosted by all these different partners and is arguably like a premier science festival that takes over the street for a full weekend. And seeing that level is both impressive, but you also recognize that there's a lot of maybe smaller events, but equally impactful events that either do not get the same coverage or mean something very different to the community where they're based. And then for myself, I've helped at Malta Science Festival. called Science in the City, and I was intern there. And again, that had this extra layer of, it had a virtual festival alongside the physical festival, and it takes over the whole city of Valletta, and various stages and things. And seeing how even that festival year to year has had to change and adapt, whether it was COVID, whether it was adverse weather conditions, and knowing that therefore festivals are very different within themselves. And I just thought that was really interesting. And Ramsey and Boyette, who are the authors of the paper, do a great job at evaluating and surveying numerous of these festivals, and really pick apart what makes them different, and then why we need to think about those differences.
Yeah, and I think one of the take-home points was that there's such a wide diversity,
Yes.
right? When, as your title says, when you say science festival, I say science festival, right? So tell us about this diversity. To you, at least, is that strength, or is that causing more problems?
No. I think on the ground it's strength. I think very much you need. We always talk about audiences in science communication. A lot, always. It's always the audience. And I think that knowing that there's a diversity of audience and many different communities you need to reach, that you need different formats for that to happen. I think the issue is that Ramsey and Boyette highlight is that within the research, using this one term of Science Festival makes it very difficult for those case studies to maybe be implemented in the way, in the best way moving forward. So something, if you do a festival and it has 50,000 people in attendance, not only obviously will the budget be very different for that, but also the range of formats needed to provide for that audience will be different. Whereas a different format, for example, Pint of Science, which happens nationally, at least in the UK, and is hosted in these sort of pub and cafe settings, you can't evaluate it necessarily within the same sentence or the same style of paper as that larger festival. And so I think it's about how do you make sure that when you're reviewing and telling others about how you're implementing things, that they can actually take away those lessons for themselves and best implement it.
Yeah, and so context matters here.
Context matters, definitely.
Quite a bit. So with that said, who do you think this paper is for? When Ramsey and Boyette wrote this paper, and also on that same wavelength, who do you hope reads your SciComm Bites?
Yeah, that's true. It's so I think in terms of Ramsey and Boyette's paper, I think it first of all probably speaks to other researchers. They're talking to their own community in that regard, saying that this is an issue that they've seen happen, that you hear a lot from people who research science communication. The reason why they're so passionate about researching it is so that it can teach or give lessons to those out on the ground doing science communication. And there's been a little bit of a divide, arguably, between SciComm practitioners and SciComm researchers, and how you get that communication going. And I think on one part, that's what SciComm Bites is trying to do, is cater to both audiences at the same time, being able for the academic science communication community to have some summaries that are written for them, as a lot of good research needs to in its communication, but also for those practitioners who maybe their first port of call won't be the journals, that they actually have a blog that they can surface. I think for me personally, it's been interesting writing for them, writing for SciComm Bites, because it still holds an academic tradition to it. It's not a personal blog by one science communicator and their reflections. It's first and foremost centered on the research, and numerous authors who are all very talented and help each other editing. And so it's interesting that it's still rooted in that and trying to maybe provide that bridge from research to practicality.
Yeah. And even JCOM themselves are trying to do this, right? To bridge the gap between researchers and practitioners. From your sense, do you think that bridge is, how strong is that bridge? Is it strengthening, or are we in the same place where
so I get myself in trouble? No,
perhaps.
No, I think there are bridges. There are definitely bridges, and I think that both communities are very aware of each other, and in many aspects, a lot of people who are doing the research are also practitioners themselves, and people who are doing the practical work are always evaluating their work as well. So I think the difficulty or the challenge becomes in the academic or the academia of it. So if I were to do a science communication activity myself and I do an evaluation, maybe I put it on a personal website, or maybe it only goes to the client. Whereas if you're in an academic setting, your drive is to get published within a paper, or that's your distribution method. So I think that's the challenge, is maybe in the distribution between the two. And I think the second area where we can see some elements of those bridges, but definitely where it could strengthen, is that you have practical science communicators who are already going out and doing activities and trying to allow academic science communication researchers or evaluators to come in and already monitor those activities. I think a lot of what you see, partly because of the controls required and the constraints you need, you find a lot of researchers who will set up their own event to then evaluate that event, whereas potentially it just involves a bit more collaboration, because a lot of the times that practitioner has done a lot of relationship building, community building, logistics that could all be factored in. So I think both sides are trying, and it's just figuring out where those both distribution and collaboration can be.
Yeah, and in fact, even in this paper, right, they looked at how researchers are using Science Festival in papers, and then on the websites, right, the Science Festival themselves, how they're showcasing that, which I thought, I mean, that's a way to bring the two, right, to showcase like, hey, actually, if there was more engagement. Did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's one of those really, that is particularly interesting because it's also that borderline of communication and marketing. And I thought it's interesting as they said, the pieces that the research wants to take out in terms of the number of people, the sort of tabletop activities, versus how you phrase that within marketing of interactivity or family friendly, and try and self-select that audience within. So I think, I love that they approach the marketing side, because in many ways that's how it is talked about in the real world situation. And so, it's interesting to see those two sort of parallel lines and where we can make the crosses.
Yeah, and I'm curious though. So, of course, they're not the only ones to have done this. Actually, tell me if you think they were the first ones to look at the Science Festival and how it's being used, because there's a nice graph look at the years, and there's this sort of massive growth that is there. And in your paper, you say, in order to address concerns or evidence-based solutions, and to improve on positive engagement aspects of festivals, we must understand the different structures of festivals, right? So give us kind of a bigger landscape here. Is Ramsey and Boyette, are they early stage, or are we talking about that they're adding to this,
I think growth? I think it's additive. I think definitely. I think as they said that, so the graph that you see is a rapid trend. It's even that's interesting in just terms of how science communication, the awareness of SciComm in general has risen into both an academic field and an industry, beyond what it was before. But I think in terms of that, what must be done, I think it was coming from as we mentioned earlier, the context is important. And I think we can struggle sometimes. Obviously, we want to reduce jargon and other things, but it's I mean, it's the point of the paper, I guess. The phrase itself means very different things to different people.
Right.
And I think also part of it is not to have one definition dominate over the others, because it is recognition of other people's work, and how, what happens particularly in a UK or an American context may be very different to what happens in a European or African or East Asian context, or anywhere you are in the world. And I think no one can own what it means to be a festival, but it's still important then within those case studies, not only for those people trying to implement the lessons, but for those other researchers who, this is one set of surveys, and it's a fantastic set of, I think it's over 50 festivals. But then if I take a data set now from Europe that I want to compare to Canada or elsewhere, I need to know that what I'm comparing is similar, so that the points that I'm making, the points of difference that I'm making, actually have relevance, and it's not just a context issue.
Yeah. So finding that, if you're building a science festival in Nigeria, maybe there's some things you don't want to reinvent, right? If we can then know a vocabulary, if we have a vocabulary of some kind, not to say we all should speak the same language, but have elements to know, okay, when I say this is what I mean, perhaps, right? This is what you're referring to, which I think is really cool. I'm curious, maybe there's some databases that do exist mapping these festivals, right? But maybe one, not just a directory, but a dashboard of some kind. Because there's a graph here, figure 2, I believe, right? It's a frequency and festival duration, right? It'd be cool if you can click on them, and then different festivals that have different lengths show up, right? Have you thought about this? Has this cost?
That would be really good. I think I've seen the closest they have is there's certain maps with like science communication masters courses, but I think definitely for festivals, I think probably the closest we have at the moment is which festivals are hiring, as people search for jobs in the industry. But I think it would be, that would be amazing. I think you could tie it definitely in with science centers. I've been a fan recently of every time I go on holiday, if there's a science center in the city, it's often really interesting to see in a different national context how their science is presented, or how their science stories are told. A database would be amazing. And I think, again, that's where you could have an interesting thing with the context of, if I put in, I'm looking at festivals that are 5,000 to 10,000 people, and it shortens or makes my Venn diagram smaller and things, that you could then target which festivals you maybe should be looking at to either compare with or to learn from. That'd be really cool.
In fact, it's multifunctional, because you have the people who are maybe want to attend, maybe the public in this case, right? And then the researchers themselves and the practitioners. I mean, everybody wins.
That would be amazing.
There's one audience we have not talked about here, and that is the public. I'm assuming if we ask them, what does science festival mean, we're probably equally going to get some really diverse answers here. What are any thoughts there?
I think it probably comes first from their own personal context, right? If I live in London and I get to go to the Great Exhibition Road Festival, I think a festival has a live band and an ice cream truck, as well as many tabletop activities and lectures. But if I'm from a smaller town, it can mean something very different. I think it is. I think the important thing with that is, sorry, I look at the camera. I think the important thing with that is the setting of the context. Sorry, or not the context, but the expectation, setting the expectation for the audience. In that, if you only see big events and big festivals every time you hear the word festival, you're thinking it's a large event and it's got money pumped into it and other things going on. And in comparison, you might hear science cafe is a term, reading groups or single presenters talking about their research, and that gives a different sense of scale. But again, depending on the place, I think that's different. And I think for the public, again, festival sounds a lot more community given, I think. When we hear music festival, we think groups and we think maybe different events all within one. And so I think there's a strength in the festival term, but also depending on which communities we're facing, I think there can be a real strength in telling the public exactly what you want to, the public that or public audience that you're dealing with, exactly what you're going to give them.
Yeah. And man, I think there's no better place to end this, or actually, I should say, start this, because this is an ongoing conversation. And as we wrap up here, 30 seconds, Sam. Cool. What are you working on right now in terms of pieces? Are you able to, if you're able to share any tidbits, are you following up on this, or have you jumped onto a different track completely?
No, so my day-to-day, I work in television, actually, doing science and nature documentaries. But in terms of being a geek for science communication, the thing I'm really keen on in my next set of writing is to look at how you can offer the broad context of science communication so that the conversations can then move into more complex case studies. I think it's, at the moment, we have incredible individual science communicators who are sharing their individual stories and trying to collect those all in one, like The Brilliant do. It's a great website of case studies, but trying to do more of that and make it more of a community.
Sam, we need to have you back. Okay.
Thank you very much. It's very kind.
This was fun. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
The 2022 STEM Peers Conference was in collaboration with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia Research Institute and brought a day of networking and support for scientists in academia and beyond.
We have started conferences in US, in Europe. We have started several science communication channels. We have a mentorship program, Gurukul. This is all about engaging the scientific community and helping them to grow professionally in their field, find their next chapter in their career. We are actively doing the science in the lab or in the company, but we are also supporting each other artistically. We are advising each other, guiding each other.
This STEM Peers Conference is our first in-person conference after the pandemic. So we are very excited to be here. STEM Peers was founded back in 2015, and this conference has been running since 2017. We have had it in Boston, then New York, then San Francisco, then 2 years of online conferences, and now we are back in Philadelphia. There are people who are from various backgrounds and various career niches, and they are talking about their career choices and answering questions about how they made those choices. So if you are in this conference, please feel free to network and reach out to us if you need any help. We are so excited to be here in Philadelphia.
So I think I have been associated with STEM Peers for a long time. It's been back 2019. It was introduced to by one of my seniors, and then I became part of Gurukul, and that had helped me enormously because it helped me look for how to look for a postdoc, how to tailor my resume, how to tailor my career path from down there. So currently I have transitioned to Genentech, and I would give around 90% of the credit to STEM Peers and STEM Peers Gurukul and their mentors, how they have helped me. So I think the major takeaway from all of this is to network, because this group of people is all there to help. It's just reaching out to them and asking for help.
The conference began with a keynote address by Dr. Bruce Levine, a professor in cancer gene therapy and the founding director of the Clinical Cell and Vaccine Production Facility at the University of Pennsylvania.
If the immune system evolved to tell self from non-self, how can the immune system recognize cancer? Well, there are rare cancer-specific immune cells, and it's looking more like a dull needle.
Dr. Levine spoke about reflections on the growth of cells in gene therapy, as he is responsible for various first breakthroughs in human adoptive immunotherapy trials to treat cancer.
T cells are in the gray bar. So it's great to be here at the STEM Peers Conference. What we need in the field of cell and gene therapy and science in general is more talent. And I'm very encouraged to see this peer mentoring group encouraging each other, providing resources to develop and move forward in careers.
Another kickstarting event was led by speakers from the postdoc affairs offices at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and Thomas Jefferson University, who provided advice on how to choose the right postdoc fellowship and the innovative education programs offered at each.
Just a note about choosing the right postdoc. So wherever you choose to do your postdoc, know that whether your fellowship is a training position or full-time employment.
If you take some more courses and things that you weren't able to as a grad student, go to a range of pharmaceutical, biotech companies, medical communications firms, nonprofits. This event has been really incredible. They have sold it out. Finding out about the career paths. So many of our scientists obviously are in our academic institutions. You really don't have an idea of what else is out there for a huge range of possibilities of career paths. So these events are really important for our students and postdocs to come out to get an idea of kind of see where they might fit in next. It might be staying in academia and going to a faculty position. So there's been panels about that, but then there's also definitely a lot of other careers that they may have had no idea about. You can really get a chance to learn more about it, and even better, meet the people, connect with them, and network with your peers. I think is something else that's really an important thing of part of this symposium.
This year's conference provided insights from various STEM professionals and a deeper look into industry, research and development careers, as well as options in industry beyond the bench.
Maybe think about what techniques or skill sets you could probably learn now to help make that transition. And absolutely agree that you will start at the bottom of the rung, and not because you're not valued. I think it's just because there is a lot to learn. Like I guess it'll be a year for me in December as a transition. It's been eye-opening because when you're in academia, you study what you study well, and but I think here you're just part of the puzzle, and maybe especially drug discovery's early parts. I think that there are just so many more segments to it. So it's kind of a humbling process, if you will, in knowing where you stand, and there's a lot to learn.
I am a postdoc at Mass General, Boston, and I just finished my 3 years there. So for some time now, I have been thinking about making the transition from academia to industry, but I realized that I didn't really know much about how to go into it. And I had been looking for a platform like this where I could talk to people with the same mindset who were going through the same transition and navigating through the same issues like visa and how to just change my mindset from academia to industry. And I think this meeting has been really, really helpful for that. Just networking with people, talking to them, the people who have been in the industry for some time. So they sharing their experiences, how they transitioned a few years back, how we can help, how we can do it. And so we just had a panel discussion on grant writing. And I feel that when I was writing my fellowship applications last year, and I kept on wishing, like, I wish that I had attended a meeting like this earlier, and that would have helped me a lot. So in general, it has been really, really helpful, and I have learned a lot. I'm really enjoying it.
What are you going to do? Are you going to go down that academic path, or are you going to go into industry? Now, going into either areas is very difficult. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to be easy. But how can you leverage? How can you figure out which path you're going to go to? Now, don't expect coming out your PhD, going into industry, that you're going to be leading a group. Okay? You don't. That's the biggest misconception. You're still at the bottom of the rung. You don't know anything about ICH, GMP.
I have been kind of a silent part of the group on Facebook for quite some time, I think 3-4 years. But the main reason I'm here today is to network and find people to help me get through industry positions, because currently I'm a postdoc and I'm networking with people and navigating how to transition from academics to industry. And I think the group of people that we have here are very helpful. And most importantly, is just simply asking a question, how can I do this? And you get a very good and very clean answer compared to the convoluted what you get online or anywhere else. and plus also it's a very personal directed answers to your questions, and that is really helpful, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Yeah. So you got to think about that way, that what you're developing will be there for a long time. So it's not like the academia where you do one experiment works, say, try it out, it's done. Yeah, you really have to go and I think that, to me, people ask me what I find different between industry and academia. The science in industry is so focused on this reproducibility, the ability to do something on a regular basis, almost like it's the type of science that you can get somebody from the street and you give them instructions and they can do it. And that's very hard.
STEM Peers offered a chance for speakers to share their professional experience in different areas like consulting and build a platform of networking for those deciding which path to take next.
Our focus is a little bit less futuristic, more now, which has its own perks, and I do love learning about what's really hot in Duchenne's muscular dystrophy right now, what's really important in non-small cell lung cancer or asthma, just being able to get a feel for all those disease areas, whereas when you're doing your PhD, you're very tightly focused, so that's a huge perk. And there's different consulting firms, different PE firms, and the like, so mine is relatively rapidly growing, so I get to, if I want to focus on something like med tech, I could focus on things like access and payers, I could. I haven't done that yet, but just the opportunity to is nice to have.
Take a step back, think through the whole continuum, and then literally see what are the different moving parts of a successful business, a successful treatment, and make a determination on which has the most impact. So I think that kind of exposure, or that kind of, given that our PhD is spent in focusing on such a small problem, I think that is what I love the most. Like, you take a step back, you think through big picture.
So one thing that I learned from my mentor was to pay it forward, and this is a forum where a bunch of scientists are looking to transition into different sort of career. Many people know what careers they want to go for, and many people aren't aware. So this is a forum where they get to learn about alternative careers, not just academic careers, for STEM graduates. And so what I like about this forum is I wish I had this 5 years ago, where I could learn about different alternative careers and not by fluke identify a different career format. So this is a forum where people get enough information.
What I love is that you constantly get to learn, and I do thrive on that. It's true in my PhD or postdoc, you are like, one cell, one receptor, that pathway, that's what you're focused on. But here, I get to learn about new diseases that I didn't even know existed. Like, that happens like every day, which also makes it hard because you kind of need to become an expert that very day and write like a report on it. But yeah, I like that learning and growing part. It's very exciting.
And what I liked about my panel specifically was there were a lot of people who came back, and they said they didn't have any clue that we could transition with this PhD skill set to these kind of different careers in finance, investment banking.
Meeting was really important to me because since my PhD and also my 3 years of postdoc now, I've been very focused on having a career in academia, and I think that's how we've kind of been shoehorned by our PIs and mentors so far, which is not a bad thing at all. But I feel like I think I've had a moment where I was like, I don't know much about industry. It's sort of a black box for me going in to industry, and I need to know what people do, how they like their jobs, and what are the career opportunities going forward. So I think it's been a great experience just networking with people, talking to people who've shared my journey with like PhD, postdoc, and then gone on to do something which I did not even know existed. There was a panel earlier on consulting and equity research, and I think my first question was what is consulting? What do you do in consulting, right? What is meant by equity research? So I think there are a lot of new things I've learned in this conference, and it will surely help me widen the horizons and then have complete information as to where I make a choice with respect to my career. So I think that's it.
The series of panels and workshops included a variety of topics from science policy to entrepreneurship, including tips on how to lead a successful nonprofit organization. and the challenges of sowing the seeds of a startup.
I am loving this conference. I wish I knew about it when I was postdoc, because there's such great information that's being shared here that's so useful for somebody who is thinking about transitioning maybe to an independent researcher position or to a different position. We used to call them alternative careers. I don't think these are alternative careers at all anymore. These are mainstream science careers. And there are so many different types of careers that somebody with a background in science, somebody with a PhD or with a postdoc, they can pursue. So I think this is incredibly important um, for the participants, for whoever is attending. It's really, really important.
You've gained a lot, and what you've gained is very important, and can, provide great benefits to society, even if you're not at the lab bench anymore. So no matter what, if you find you can't do research anymore for whatever reason, it's not the end of the world. There's so much more you can do. I feel like, I've accomplished so much more in what I've done since leaving the bench than I would have ever done if I'd stayed at the bench and kept doing research.
Really being true to your mission. So at ACR, our mission is to prevent and cure all cancers through research, education, communication, collaboration, and funding, as well as patient advocacy. So being true to your mission and working with all the important and relevant stakeholders. We all know that we can't do it ourselves, so we have to work with a lot of different people to drive our mission to move the needle. So if we are going to eradicate cancer, we have to work with all of the different stakeholders, all of the different sectors that are involved in healthcare and public health. So understanding that we can't do it ourselves, that we have to work with everybody else, and together we can do it.
I think the most important skill set that for like the positions that like I have or like the kind of thing that I do and my team does, the most important skill set that we need, I think we all of you here already have. So critically analyzing data, figuring out what's good science, and communicating that out, both verbally and writing. So you all have that. Now, some of the things I think that I had to learn when I started at ACR, so project management, that's really, really important because every single thing that I do is complex and has many, many different aspects. It's like a puzzle. There's so many pieces, and all these pieces have to come together for that book to be ready on the deadline when we need it by. And we talk about deadlines when we are in academia, but they can always be pushed. We want to submit the big paper tomorrow, but if the data is not there, we can always push it to the next week, right? But for the reports that we release, those dates are fixed or they're arranged maybe a year in advance.
We can help postdocs and fresh PhD students navigate that murky waters of businesses and transition to industry and so forth, because most of the graduate work is geared towards academics, not industry. So you need to have that pathway to industry more clear. So that's the key thing.
If you have a goal and you really committed to that goal, you can if you keep at it, there's a good chance that you can make it happen. So it's about that perseverance. Like we had deals fall through the 11th hour. It was devastating. We had deals we had to walk away from. That was devastating. When our 65th person said no and we had nobody else to turn to, it was tough, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I just agreed. If you want it, you can keep pushing. No guarantees, but also funding's a little bit tighter now. But, may loosen up. But I just agree with my panelists here that everyone has their own path. You have to prioritize things, and if you want to do it, maybe you have a goal, keep at it.
Love the job you work, and you will never have to work another day in your life. Because as he just said, that it can be stressful, but if you really like what you're doing, the stress will go away. And once your goals are aligned, that okay, just think about it. We are sitting in the US, in the biggest city of the country, and we have this opportunity to find a cure for cancer. That is just so humbling, right? And if our efforts can do that, it's just amazing. We come from different parts of the world, coming here, sitting at the center of gene and cell therapy. That's just take a moment to think about it, right? So not many people, we are the best of the best in the world, I can say that. So if you really want to achieve that level, you really need to love it. And also, be prepared for failures. But the passion and love is important, because when you start loving it, again, it's the work-life balance or work-life integration thing is kind of, up for debate, but it will take a lot of your time and personal sacrifices. And one more thing I will add is that, okay, we have raised money, getting revenue, the real fun starts now. Because once a company has received so much money, then we are in the next level of stress, because now we have to say, okay, we have to do phase 1 trial. Will it be successful or failure? Because this is just the starting of the next step. Now we are thinking about, okay, will there be M&A? Will a Pfizer buy us out or not? So this is just the beginning of the next level, which is a completely different level of stress. But you can only do that if you really like, and if you're really into finding a cure for cancer. And as I say to my team members also, that cancer cells don't sleep on the weekends, right? They are growing all the time. So if they are growing, we have to work our butt off to fight them, right?
To make the event even better, a surprise dance portrayed the connections between performing, STEM learning, and teaching.
Arts can really help us understand who we are. It can help us understand our perception of reality. It can help us even form hypotheses. So what does this look like of bringing the arts into our science world and thinking about the arts as an equal partner to the scientific journey? In direct relation to what Vikram just talked about, I wonder if there are any ways to use the arts to look at how the increase in dopaminergic firing that we talked about can actually be related to reinforcement. And if this reinforcement can be associated with habitual learning.
From education resources to career advice, STEMpeers also empowers and supports scientists in their academic journey through representation, mental health, and social support. Join their community online to learn more about the next annual STEMpeers conference. The Art and Ecology platform called Estudio Nuoso hosted Art in Dialogue with 100 Years of Tropical Science at this year's 8th edition of the Berlin Science Week.
The dialogue was centered around the 100th anniversary of the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute research station that is called Barrio Colorado Island, that is turning 100 years this year. And this station was built around the time, well, it was because of the construction of the Panama Canal, that this artificial island was created when they flooded a whole forest and community area, and this island resulted. And then scientists just found that a lot of biodiversity went to this island, and it became a research station, which eventually has spread out to the whole country. So it's not just around the canal watershed, but in effect, despite this colonial history, it has resulted in being the longest ongoing conversation on scientific research around the tropics in the world. And so the conversation itself was revolving around an art and science residency that we were invited to do at Estudio Nuoso, which is my art and ecology platform in Panama. And we invited 3 artists to engage with 3 scientists that are doing long-term research on the island. That means that they often either have engaged in research that they're into it for the long run, or that they are building upon existing research that has already been taken on by previous generations of scientists, let's say. So that the other research is around mycology and pathogens and fungi that actually control forest tree population, and the effects of heat and climate change on tropical forests and trees. And we wanted to share about this art and science residency, but in the context of what is the role that art and science collaborations can play in promoting greater awareness and care for the tropics on a global scale, and perceiving the tropics as part of the interconnectedness and the care that we need to have of all ecosystems, but particularly why the tropics are so important.
As an artist, facilitator, founder, and director of Studio Nuoso, Ella Spalding reflected on the connection between art and science that was formed through this collaboration.
Art is also a form of research, and that it can be beneficial. It is a mutually beneficial relationship between the artist and the scientist when these collaborations come. And that is our approach as facilitators of these residencies. It's not intended that the artists merely illustrate what the scientists are conveying, but actually that they are engaged in the questions and in the conversations together. And I think it does come across in the conversation, because the scientists also got a lot out of the reflections that the artists were having in that time of that exchange. Also, having to work through explaining research to somebody else makes you go back into certain aspects of the research that you take for granted when you're way ahead in your research process. And so I think for them, it was really nice to be able to be on the island, talking about their research, engaging with the artists who are so connected to their sense of wonder and curiosity. So that kind of creates a re-inspiration process.
On a community scale, this research ignites networks and bridges of solidarity to explore the tropics' role in the overall health of the planet.
The residency was 2 long weekends on the island, and then a lot of time independent work. And there was an exhibition about the 100th anniversary of CCI in Washington, in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., which was then brought to Panama, to the Panama Canal Museum in Panama City, and expanded. And part of that expansion of the exhibition was to include these artworks that were generated during the residency. And so those were accompanied also by public programs that engaged school students of various different schools. The artworks were intended to convey the experience of being in that forest that has been studied for 100 years. And so I think that did a lot of impact and outreach within the context of this museum that is already quite visited by locals.
As Studio Nuoso looks forward to celebrating their 10th year anniversary, Spalding is already planning for what's ahead in the future of their work.
Ultimately, what I'm looking to create is a nature culture corridor, to work along biological corridors, to look at scientists that are already working in densely biodiverse places and support them in their research, to look at to really see what lines of possible collaboration and solidarity can be created between institutions across different ecosystems and across the world, and how we can harness the potential that is there to raise awareness, to be part of this movement, to create a shift of perception and relationship with the natural world from domination and separation to reciprocity and care, and a reflection, like in the sense of like we're reflecting, but in the sense also that nature is a reflection of us, or our environments are a reflection of us. And that, there's just a lot of work that we know that needs to happen and can happen, I think. So we will have this 10-year anniversary exhibition next year in August at the Contemporary Art Museum in Panama. And like I said, I am trying to build this nature culture corridor across borders, across continents, thinking along the lines of biological corridors, but also lines of migration, currents, and ocean currents and air currents as a strategy, as a very concrete strategy to defend those places. And so anyone who's interested in being part of that.
BioLink Depot is a unique community-based nonprofit organization in the San Francisco Bay Area. Their efforts are focused on promoting STEM training and literacy by providing schools with millions of dollars worth of lab equipment that might otherwise end up in landfills. Executive Director and Board Member Tom Steele is here to share more with us. Thank you so much, Tom, for joining us today. To get started, I'd love to ask you, how did BioLink Depot come about?
Our organization was founded a little over 20 years ago when a key employee, Hank Stern, working at Genentech, was in the middle of trying to figure out some, key issues for the company, principally, how to get more qualified employees into their staff. And they were having a hard time growing the company and finding suitable people to work in their biotech labs. And then along the way, he was observing that when there was upgrades to equipment happening at their site, that often brand new equipment was not brand new, but used equipment was being thrown out when they were replacing with brand new stuff, and that the older equipment was perfectly good, but they just upgraded to the new version that had extra bells and whistles. And in parallel to that, we realized that there were teachers out there that were really struggling to teach biotechnology and just biology and genetics and things like that to their students because they had very, very limited funding. And science supplies and science equipment are always really costly. So he kind of connected the dots there and said, wait a minute, how about we take this equipment that's perfectly good, but we're throwing it away. We give it to teachers that'll help them improve their STEM education. And then we'll have better people that are, people that are better educated, better qualified, better experienced to come and work at our company. So that's what we have done since then, is to rehome equipment and supplies from biotech and other labs, get it into the hands of teachers so they can improve the hands-on learning of the students.
That's a very inspiring mission for sure. What would you say is the main way that this is affecting the environment?
Well, the key thing is that there's material that people don't want anymore. And, business, it's big business. They're in a hurry. They have a lot of money often. So sometimes the simplest solution for them is to get a dumpster and throw everything away. That ends up in landfill. And for someone like me, that's pretty sad because this is usable stuff, right? So it's literally like a rich neighbor just not caring about their car and just throwing it away because they can't be bothered to deal with it. And honestly, for some of these companies, that is the most sort of fastest, most efficient way to deal with things that they don't want. But luckily, people have really considered sustainability more in recent years, and they often have a sustainability manager or just a lab manager who's conscious of these things and says, wait a minute, let's try to find another home, another use for these devices, this equipment, those like supplies. And then they contact us and say, is this stuff you can take? We review their offerings, and usually we can accept most of their items. We bring it to a warehouse in Oakland, and then we give it away to teachers for free, and they take it back to their labs where they work with the students on doing things like extracting DNA from strawberries or, learning about algae and how that can maybe help global warming. So we're getting the tools and the materials, the supplies into the hands of the teachers who have very, very limited resources to purchase those themselves, mostly.
Okay, so kind of going off of that, can you share a little bit more about how the donation process works?
Yeah, basically donors contact us typically. We don't even have to really do much outreach. We're pretty well known, especially here in the Bay Area, as people move around from company to company, or we've even had people that have been students who benefited from receiving supplies from our depot. And then they went to work for a biotech company and then said, hey, wait, we're cleaning out the lab and we have extra things we don't need. And so they'll typically email or call us. And we also have ongoing donors. There's donors like Bayer in Berkeley, Gilead Sciences down in Foster City are regular donors who were just on their program and we're their partner. So there'll just be an email every few months. They say, here's a list of what we have. We review that together. Usually at this point for returning donors, they know what we take. And then we just arrange, they mostly very generously are able to have the material delivered to our warehouse. And, sometimes even now people are mailing things in from all around the country, or even sending us pallets of material from Chicago, from New Jersey, from Colorado recently. We had somebody send us a pod of material from Milwaukee in December. So we receive very, very large quantities of material. Just to give an example, the statistics we had for, I think, 2021 were that we had saved about 135 tons of material people didn't know what else to do with.
Wow, that's definitely a lot and shows how this is so impactful. What is the main benefit that this brings teachers and students?
It gives them a real chance to do real biotechnology experiments and other types of scientific studies in their labs. And we even receive materials sometimes from schools that are closing down or just moving, and they have older stuff they don't want anymore. And we're able to rehome that material with typically Title I schools that have much less budget to buy materials. So I just think that the way that people really get excited about science and learn about science is through actually experiencing, adding an acid to a base and watching the pH change and, like I said, extracting maybe DNA from a strawberry and saying, wow, that's crazy, look at that. And so that, I think, is what sparks the interest in people that we hope will become the scientists of the future. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, just that we will have a more scientifically literate society going forward. That people cannot be afraid of science, but can understand what it's about, and take that kind of experience in high school maybe forward as they go into whatever career they end up in, and just be interested in science and curious, and maybe even some of them become staff members at science-based companies. Typically, for people that end up working at science-based or biotech companies, they have really good careers, opportunities, going forward. They make better money. They work in a safe and supportive environment with companies that are embracing equity and inclusion. And so we hope it opens up better career paths for people through having better scientific education.
So what about your hopes for the future of the organization?
For the future, we would really like to expand our program nationally. So right now we're pretty much based in the Bay Area in terms of getting material out to schools and also to community colleges and some universities. We also support some nonprofits, but there's a lot of material we have available here in the Bay Area with its very high percentage of biotechnology companies here. And we'd love to be able to get the material out of the hands of educators all around the country. So we're looking into different pathways to do that.
Awesome. So what does STEM mean to you?
I believe in science. I believe in the power of science. One of the fun quotes I like is this thing that says, pick a fight with science. Science always wins. So, science is nature, is the world, is the way things work. And I just grew up as a very curious person. I got interested in science because I wanted to know how the world worked. And why was there a rainbow? How did a rainbow miraculously happen in the sky? What is a laser? That's incredible. What does it do? How does it work? So I ended up working in a laser technology for many, many years. And I just think science is really, really cool. And I wish that STEM could really inspire students to just realize how cool science is. So I think a lot of people, they come into science thinking, oh, it's really hard. It's very complicated. I'm not going to understand it. What's it about? All these equations, all this math. But, if you really spend a little time and be patient with yourself, getting familiar with it, I think that, you can, appreciate the magic that is in all of the scientific endeavors that we are engaged in now in the world. So everything from semiconductors to, new healthcare, to sending rockets into the sky that maybe populate Mars or something. Science is just really cool, and technology that evolves from science. Science is what underpins the technology, including this amazing Zoom video we have going over the internet. It's all technology, right? And so scientists have discovered these new things. And I think the joy of discovery is something I'd love for youngsters to appreciate. We just love to get the word out about our program so that other companies that have excess materials know about us, to be able to donate to us. And we always want to connect with more educators so they can come receive materials. We always have a lot of stock on hand at our depot in Oakland, and we just want to get into the hands of people that could use it.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate you being here with us today. And I'm excited to see you guys continue to grow and continue to make an impact and a change in our environment and in schools.
Super. It's good talking with you today.
Tough questions, new insights, diverse perspectives. Welcome to Questions of the Day with Fanuel Muindi.
All right. So wonderful to have you, Dr. Vicky Flechas. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's get right to it. We're here in Bogota, Colombia, and it's been wonderful to get to know about the ecosystem of science engagement here. And so I came across Bicho's Steam and Microscopia podcast that you run. So we're going to talk about them today. Okay? Right. So let's just start off. Bicho's Steam. Where did that idea come from?
The idea come from the pandemic because with my friend, we started like doing experiments with our kids. Both we are moms, we have 2 kids, and we started like doing experiments. So then people start asking us, how do you do the experiments? What material you use? So we think that it was a good thing to share this with other families and other kids, and we start like that from the pandemic.
And then Microscopio podcast, because you do this at the same time, right? Together.
Yeah, the Microscopio, the idea like is from 2019.
Okay.
And with my friend, we have kids. So she has a kid, and they ask many questions. So we also like ask why we can answer those questions in a nice way, like very like with rigorous way. I don't know how to say that, but easy to they understand what the explanation. So we found women that work in each topic to explain us. So we don't answer the questions because we are not experts on every topic. So we found women that help us to answer the questions. And the kids have many good questions. And our like lema in Spanish is there's no small question.
Right,
so
right.
We try to answer.
And I love the fact you're focusing on kids, right? 3 to 9 years old.
Yeah.
Why that age range? Why do you think it's important to target them in particular?
Yeah, I think because later they're not so interested in science, and because at these early ages they are not like shy, and they ask many questions, and they also like present their hypothesis, but they are not shy and they say everything. So it's like in these ages, and we need like to promote this curiosity, and also I think it's very nice. And one thing that I notice is when they're like young, they're like 50-50 girls and boys. But then it's mostly boys, and I don't understand what happened, in which like point girls like think that they are not good for science.
Right. So that's hence your target in particular. So now let's take apart Bicho's Steam, for example. Tell us more. So what do you do there? I understand there's some kits that you are selling, and also that you do some programming on the ground. Tell us more about just how it all works.
We start like selling kits, like from the pandemic, and you put like everything together, and we try everything because in YouTube, for example, there are many fake like contents. Yeah. So you get disappointed because you do the thing that they are doing and nothing didn't work. So we sell the kits, and also now we do these workshops in universities, like for kids, but in universities, in schools, also in other spaces, or in birthday parties. So we are doing these workshops for kids, and all the kids have their materials, and they can like hands-on in the things. So
yeah, so they really get a hands-on experimental feel.
Yes.
Right, and then you have the Instagram page as well, right, that you showcase some of the work that you're doing. Right?
Yeah.
And so, as we were briefly talking offline earlier, how do you think about impact in a way, right? In your scenario, what kind of things are you looking for, or you hope to look for, to tell you that what we're doing is having an effect?
I know, for example, in Bichos, I like that many kids are like coming back for every activity we do. They are like they are present every time. So that's nice because they're like very like excited to do science stuff. For example, like Halloween, we did this activity for science in Halloween. So we did this like eyes, like gross eyes, like using like cooking stuff. So and they came and they were very happy, and they like some candies, but they are like doing many experiments like with reaction scheme. chemical reactions. So
the coming back,
Mhm.
right? That you're seeing that, and of course, it's the parents that are buying these kits, right? And they're bringing the kids back to the events.
the parents are very happy also because otherwise the kids. Yeah.
So it's actually important that the parents are part of the equation. You
Yeah,
cannot leave them out of it completely, right? So you do take a chance in making sure that the parents are aware of what you're doing. And as I understand it, you are a student at the University of Los Andes, and you still have connections there, right? So that helps you with getting.
Yeah, it's why it's easier for us to do these courses in the Universidad de Los Andes because I work and I study at the Universidad
Right,
for many
right,
years.
right,
So
right.
yeah, they know me, and so it's easier for us to like do this in the university.
Yeah, and this is something that people don't think a lot about is, you know, we do this work. It's passionate work, right? I wonder for you, like what keeps you going in this work?
Yeah, because I'm a little bit disappointed of the other part, the academics, but I like kids and I like to see like they're like very happy doing this stuff. So maybe it's in this stage that you can like do something. Maybe when they're older, it's more difficult. But in this, they need to see that there's science in everything. There's science.
Right,
So maybe here's like we can have a real impact.
Yeah, and in the ecosystem here in Colombia as well, it's developing, it's growing. So do you have a sense of where is it headed? Should we say, like, so you have your initiative here, right? And how does it fit into the bigger landscape? Do you collaborate with other groups, for example?
No, we are not collaborating with. I collaborate with Ciencia Café para su merced, but this is an initiative for the science outreach, but for adults.
I see.
So with bichos and with the El Microscopio, we're trying to reach like kids, and there's no like lot of initiatives here in Colombia.
I see.
And as we like talked before, is if there are many content, but it's in English, so it's very hard because well, now we speak Spanish, so it's very hard like to find content in Spanish.
Right. Hence the focus that you have here as well, which presents an opportunity, if you will, right? That in this ecosystem, 20 years from now, what do you hope? Where's Colombia or Bogota specifically with science engagement? Is it more funding? Is it more initiatives?
I hope more funding and more initiatives because we need like get like science closer to the people. So because scientists are in the universities, in the labs, and it's like other world. So we need to show people that science is fun. It's not like a thing like very complex like equations and all the stuff. That's science in making rice. So we need to like
bridge the connection, right? Bring the two together. So more initiatives, more funding. So if there are funders watching, I think the ecosystem here in Colombia is ripe for growth. I think there's passion. There are people here that want to do the work, and for those organizations out there or initiatives around the world that may be interested to collaborate with you, they should get in touch, right?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Always. And so with that, it's been fantastic chatting with you. This was just a snippet in terms of learning tomorrow. We'll have the links to your Instagram and website and so
Twitter
forth, and Twitter. So just make sure you click on those links and get to know about their initiatives. And so with that, thank you so much.
Tough questions, new insights, diverse perspectives. Welcome to Questions of the Day with Fanuel
My name is
Muindi.
Brian Mateus. I'm an undergrad student here at the University of Los Andes in Bogota, and I co-manage university student group about birds.
My name is Daniel Gutierrez. I just graduated from biology here at Universidad de los Andes, and with Brian, we have co-directed the Grupo Uniandino de Ornitología, or ornithological student group from Universidad de los Andes, for over 2 years now. Well, so we have a very strong focus on scientific communication and letting people know, especially Colombians, about our huge avian biodiversity. So we're very interested in sharing whatever knowledge we have on birds and being able to make that knowledge as accessible as possible.
Yeah, so as part of our main activities, well, the group has existed over at least 20 years, but it's pretty intermittent. So we are managing it now, but we mainly focus on doing like birding tours here at the university and here at Bogota. We don't have that many birds, but we have a lot, over 100 bird species.
One very good thing about birds that helps us a lot with this initiative is that birds are very accessible to the public. So they're very easy to see. People appreciate them fairly easily. And so it is relatively easy to show people what birds do we have around the city and in general in the country.
Our main focus and purpose of this group is to like give the people the like the power to be empowered of their birds, because Colombia is the number one country in terms of bird species. So we want the people to be able to know that and be empowered of what they have, right? So yeah, I think that's our main focus, and also to develop like birding skills, which is required. You don't like see the bird and that's all. You have to have a little set of skills, and we want to teach the people. So our public, it's mainly students, but the students for all over the careers, the majors.
Many different majors, not only biology.
Yeah, so we want to let them that. We want the people to know the amount of biodiversity we have here. That's our main goal.
That is a great advantage that we have here in the university, because our campus is not that big, but it has a lot of green. And being by the foothill of the Andes, which are considered one of the greatest hotspots of bird biodiversity in the world, not only in the amount of species that we can find, of net species, but also on the amount of species that take over in each side. So like the species that we can see in the Andes here in Bogota, we're at 2,600 meters above sea level, will be very different than the ones that will be found just 500 meters lower or higher. So being by the foothill is very advantageous in that sense, because we get over 70 species on our campus, and many of them are adapted or know how to dwell in an urban environment. So we can show the public a lot of species and a lot of diversity as well. So some species that are very colorful and very charismatic in that sense, but then others that perhaps don't have very bright colors, but have other characteristics, so like their vocalizations or their ecology that is very unique or very special. So many of like our participants get a good grasp of Andean birds just by going to our bird watching tours in the university.
Yeah, just for instance, as Daniel was saying, these birds are not found here in Bogota, but it's a great example of what he just said, of colorful birds and not so colorful birds that are here. Like, for example, this is a night owl, which is diurnal and lives on the ground, which is pretty weird. And well, this we call him barranquero.
These are
so as part of our activities, we want to share the birds that are not necessarily here in Bogota at the campus, but in Colombia, in order to like give people that empowerment of knowing what the birds they have, because most of the people don't know all of these colorful and beautiful birds.
I think joining our group is mainly gives a space for bird enthusiasts to interact with other people, regardless of their age, their background, their experience, or their professional development or career. So I think that's one of the main contributions that we can have in our group, but also as our group has been expanding, we believe that we can also give the opportunity to younger researchers to get their first steps in doing research and learning what type of research we can do in ornithology, and hopefully we can contribute to teaching a new generation with whatever experience we have gained up to now in our careers.
Yeah, I guess that's part of our legacy. We want to give the people, the new researchers, like some tools in order to be able to do some new research about Colombian birds.
Just this semester, we expanded our team. So we wanted to get more people on board for us to be able to expand our impact. And I think we've been fairly successful in that sense. So our team is now comprised of 10 people, including the two of us. And we have some people focused on scientific communication, some people focused on more research, some people focused on the logistical parts, which is fundamental to be able to
and
do
all of
many
them
things.
are students,
And
the same as us.
And it's something really nice because some of them are biologists, but others are not. So we have members that are studying literature, that are studying psychology,
and I don't remember what else, but not all of them are biologists. So I think that's pretty cool, because one thing that we have focused on in our group is that not only biologists go birding, all the people can go birding, because it's part of like being in contact with nature, with animals. Birds are by far the easiest ones to see, right? So yeah, we have like developed this new organization in order to get the group a more structured like sense of view.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think we are targeting, or the goal that we are targeting is for Colombians to not only know but appreciate the national treasure that we have here in our country by having all of these huge diversity of birds, and that is not found like this in any other part of the world. Like we have 2,000 bird species for a fairly small country. So that is a unique thing, and it's something that we aim for people to recognize and to appreciate, to the point that birds have to be protected, the environment has to be protected. And it can seem like a very high goal, but we've noticed that by doing small steps and by getting more people thrilled with birds and hooked up on going to see birds, we can hopefully eventually get a snowball effect, and those people will then go on to have their own influence in other people, and so on and so forth. And hopefully we can put a little grain of sand in contributing to conservation of birds in Colombia.
When people hear the word data, many times the first thing that comes to mind is a picture, something like a graph or maybe a color-coded map. But there's no reason that you can't map data to some other sensory modality. Like you could imagine mapping data to a haptic glove and then feeling the pattern of the data on your hand. But in our case, we were interested in exploring the ways that sound could convey information, which immediately raises a question. Is it even possible for sound, by which I mean non-speech sound, to convey information?
What you see again here is the journey that we talked about before, where we have the unfolded chain on one side and the folded proteins over there on the left. And let me actually turn this around by or let me actually simplify this a little bit, because in the models that we build as educational tools, these kinds of computer simulations, you need to do that sort of calculations are really on the complicated side. And so what we did is we basically just represented the protein as a string of beads, and there's two kinds of amino acids, the white ones and the dark ones, and they interact with water molecules differently, which is what leads to the different kinds of motions. And the same kind of journey you just saw from a full computer calculation with all the atoms can actually take place in this simplified model where you have the extended protein on one side and then various disordered versions of the chain, and then eventually the chain forms this nice little hairpin, as we like to call it, that is the folded state of this. And let me actually take this picture and rotate it by 90 degrees. So the folded state here is at the bottom and the unfolded states are at the top. And that's actually what an energy landscape, as we like to call it, of proteins looks like. So there's really only one folded state there, and there's a very large number of possible configurations that corresponds to all the unfolded states of the protein. And all of these are higher in energy than the state that the protein should fall into in order to be folded. And Carla did a little bit of cleanup on this picture and organized the connections between the states a little bit more neatly using her Kima software that we were just listening to. So this is actually kind of the same picture again with the folded state at the bottom and then the unfolded states at the top. And then the connecting lines are the allowed transitions. So it turns out as a protein moves, it can't beam, unlike Scotty. So you can't suddenly go from here to over there. You actually have to move through a series of steps, right, before you end up over there. And so that's why these purple lines don't connect all the possible states to all the other possible states. There's only certain connections that are allowed. And while the protein tries to fold, it basically follows those connections around this network. And so I think I can actually run this.